Welcome back to another episode of the Moving On Method. I'm so excited today to introduce you to my friend Lucy Price. She's a relationship coach who supports people in getting over their exes, healing from heartbreak, and moving on to a life they love. She uses evidence-backed self-help techniques and practical tips to support her clients in getting over their ex in 3 months or less, love themselves, and cultivate healthy, meaningful relationships. Before becoming a relationship coach, Lucy was a health coach and a yoga instructor. This has helped her to take a holistic approach when it comes to navigating the ups and downs of a separation. And I also feel it's all so closely related, how your body feels, how you feel emotionally. So I love that you have pivoted from one to the other. Lucy, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So you had an idea for a really great topic today, and it's something we haven't discussed, but a question I get all the time. How do you navigate social media as it pertains to your ex? Like, what expectations around it are reasonable? Can we tell them not to post things? What do we do? So I love that we're going to talk about this, but I would love to hear your experience in this area first and your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that social media is definitely something we have to navigate in a whole new way nowadays, especially with just how much is online, and it can be very challenging in separation. So I also felt like this hasn't really been discussed, so I was very excited to speak to you on it. And my journey goes, of course, whenever you come into work like coaching, I think you have some sort of personal impact that also motivates you to get into the fields. And that is the same thing that happened to me. So about 7 years ago, I was a health instructor, a yoga instructor, personal trainer, and I really was going through a challenging time in my relationship. So I was going through a very hard separation where there was a lot of emotional manipulation in that relationship that took a number on me. And I had gone to therapy, I had gone to support groups, and in the end, I ended up hiring my first relationship coach to support me through that time. And I noticed that the techniques and the support that I was getting through coaching were just different than I had gotten through therapy and had gotten through my friends or family support. And so that's what led me to want to dive deeper into relationship coaching, into separation. It was in part inspired by that separation because I know how hard it was for me to go through that
Mhm.
separation and just not feel like there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of language around just block your ex, go no contact. But at that time, that wasn't really a viable option for me. And I know for a lot of co-parents, that's not really a viable option to just never see your ex again. So I felt at the time, I felt pretty unsupported. And that's what led me to coaching. And as soon as I had the experience of coaching, I just fell in love with the process. And I wanted to get trained up to be able to support people through that as well.
It's amazing because I don't think there's anything more isolating than
Mhm.
going through a breakup. And no matter how well-intentioned your friends are, I mean, I don't know about you, but like I remember in my own separation feeling like I didn't want to burden them with my feelings. Like here she is
Mhm.
again crying and, needing support I don't know how to give. So I think it's an amazing, amazing connection for someone to make with someone who solely just exists to help them through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do worry about putting too much on your friends sometimes. It's like you want to speak to somebody about it, you want to process it, but you do worry that you're putting too much. In the case of my separation, there's a lot of, friends that crossed over with each other. And in some ways I felt isolated and not knowing who to talk to about it. So having that person who's just there to support you is a really beautiful thing. It's a lovely source of support and it made such a difference in my life. So I definitely think that if you're going through something like that, find someone who can support you just for you because it really does make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of social media, it's so funny because like you see the memes, it's like, as soon as a dad starts posting like or a guy starts posting fish pictures and a woman is posting like angry quotes, like there's a breakup happening.
Yep.
I'm sure you see this all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as someone's putting, certain styles of inspirational quotes, there's something going on. And I think it's a very natural, I say natural, I think it's a very human response to want to start putting things like that out there because you want to get your own sense of support and you want to feel validated. But then waters definitely start to get a little murky, especially in terms of divorce and co-parenting because of the relationships that are involved.
Absolutely. I remember like 3 days after my ex and I split for good, I put some sort of post on social media that was very like, look at me, I'm hurting, and my brother called me and was like, take it down. Just take it down and don't be that girl. And now when I see people do that, I mean, look, does it look like a cry for help? Absolutely. But does it also, for me come across as like this person is really hurting and
Mhm.
is posting this on social media actually going to take that hurt away? Probably not.
Yeah, and I think what ends up happening internally, I'm curious what you think, but sometimes I think when we put the inspirational quote or we put something out there, we feel like we're doing something to help us. It's like this internal, we think we're doing something where we think we're getting that support because then people are reaching out to us or we're being able to feel validated, but it's not the real support that's actually going to help you. It's almost this like this feigned sense of getting help.
Well, it's a dopamine boost, right? It's
Yeah,
like people commented, they're asking if you're okay. And then it's very surface level because none of these people who are asking for the right reasons. Like everyone loves the
right.
gossip. They want to know what's going on. But I,
Right.
I think I think more than that, we are not celebrities, right? And like the breakups shouldn't be done online because what you post is there. Like it's
Hmm.
memorialized. Even if you take it down, someone could have screenshots and it can go to your ex and it can ramp things up if you're co-parenting. You don't
Hmm.
want to be pissing each other off more than you're already going to be pissed off, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it definitely aggravates the waters of the relationship. Like if you are trying to find a co-parenting solution between you and your ex, or even if you're still in the process of creating the parenting plan or going through the separation, those screenshots are things that can be brought into the room when you're going through custody battles. So I think it's something that we have to be mindful of what you put on the internet is permanent, and you have to be very aware of that could be brought into situations you might not be thinking of when you're emotionally heightened in the moment, but it's important to consider. Or, down the line, you don't know who's going to see it. Like these are things that your kids might see. And it's just something that you have to be aware of when you're in that very emotionally raw place.
Every co-parent I've ever worked with, man or woman, in one of the first few sessions will bring to me the fact that they are so angered and annoyed by the fact that like, oh, look at them. Now they're playing the perfect parent on social media
Hmm.
and posting themselves doing this with the kids. And they're constantly stalking each other to see what the other is up to. And it's like they
Hmm.
feel this sense of, well, they shouldn't post the kids, but
Hmm.
everyone is posting their kids, right? So it's like, but it doesn't really make much sense. How do you handle that for people? Because that is a big topic around here.
Yeah, that is a very massive topic and it's very nuanced. And I think that the very first thing that I looked at when I was doing research around social media when it came to co-parenting specifically is that there isn't really any like laws against posting your kids online. And I think that when you just take it in the core perspective, that's important to keep in mind. It's like there's limited things that you're able to do unless it's at risk to the child,
Hmm.
unless it's of harm to the child. And so I think from like if you're thinking from a legal perspective, I'm not a lawyer, so there's limited, scope that I can give there, but there's limited amount that the court could do if your ex is posting your child online. In terms of emotionally, that's where that you have to try your best, I think, to keep those lines of communication open. And that can be really challenging when you're going through a messy separation, when you're going through a divorce like that. But it's tough because you can only really control what you can control. You can only really control how you show up and how you behave when you have the kids. So I think it requires a lot of emotional regulation and intelligence to take care of yourself and to do your best to express your concerns to your ex.
Exactly. And I think it's, the big question is just because I'm triggered, does that mean that they're doing something wrong? Right.
Wrong.
Like it's much easier for us to move past a relationship with imagining this person as the bad guy, at least for some of us. And then when they're putting themselves out there in a way that would appear to the public that they are not, in fact, the bad guy or the bad ex-wife or whatever, it's like, hey, wait, now no one's going to believe me. And I think with so many people that I've worked with, that's what I've been able to uncover from them. It's like the perception. They want everyone's perception of their ex to be the same as theirs, which,
Mm.
obviously isn't fair, but it's understandable when you are emotional and hurt in the early stages of a separation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of goes back to that sense of validation, that your perspective is real or your perspective is true. And I think that's where it's so important to look after yourself and validate your own experience as much as possible, but also be mindful of you can't control other people's perspectives. And so I think you have to my viewpoint is you have to go through life knowing that you can't control how people are going to see you. You can't control how people are going to see your ex, but you can control how you show up and you can control how you respond to different situations and have a say. Who do you want to be in this separation? Who do you want to be as a co-parent? Who do you want to be in navigating this? Because that
Mhm.
is what's within your realm of control, but you can't control, unfortunately, how other people perceive a situation. And it can be so emotionally challenging when you're in that situation because things are raw and things do hurt. But that's where I think there's an opportunity to place yourself back in that position of power around what you can control. And you can control how you show up for yourself and you can control how you respond to the situation.
And also, something worth discussing are what boundaries you're going to set for yourself around social
Mhm.
media. Like, you are not going to feel good if you are just constantly looking at your ex's feed or their
Mhm.
stories or whatever it is. And, that's kind of on you. It's not their fault for posting and making you
Mhm.
upset about it. Like, isn't it yours for looking? What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we tend to think of boundaries a lot in terms of another person, but I actually think that there's so much to be said with boundaries within ourselves and not going digging when we know it's going to hurt us. Or, on social media, there's a lot of ways to create privacy and to create space between you and your ex. That doesn't necessarily just mean blocking them. If you want to move past a separation. And if you want to look after yourself, I do think creating some sort of space is helpful because otherwise you're going throughout your day and you're opening your phone and you're just getting activated by seeing something that's, popping right up on your phone. Or if you're going digging, then you're in some ways looking for something and that's going to be activating too. So I do think that when you're going through a separation, it's really important to think about how can you separate yourself from your ex, including on social media. So can you unfollow them? Can you put some sort of mute on them on Instagram? There's options to mute their profile, to mute their stories. Can you be really disciplined with yourself of not going digging when that's going to activate you and when that's going to make it harder for you to process? I think that this is something that everybody can do. It's difficult because there's an innate wanting to know in our brains, but the more
Mhm.
disciplined you are around this, I do think the more progress you're going to make ultimately.
For sure. And I think there's two parts to that, right? It's like I blocked my ex on social media as soon as we separated, only because I was so scared that like anything I did would be
Mhm.
looked at. In the beginning, you're a little bit naive and you think, oh my God, if I post this picture out with my girlfriends, the court is going to think I'm a bad mom. That's not, in fact, the case, unless you are leaving your child home alone to go and party with your friends. But, I thought blocking was the right thing to do. But then my friends would be like, "Oh my God, did you see what he posted? Or do you see where he is?" And da da da. And I had to then set that boundary with my friends of,
Mhm.
thanks so much, but like I blocked for a reason. I don't need you coming in here and showing me this stuff. And I posted about this once years ago, and people were like, yes, yes. Like, why do people feel the need to do this? Like, it's not helpful at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's sometimes people think they're trying to help when they're in that situation of taking your side or just wanting to have that dopamine hit like you said. But sometimes we just have to really to sit our friends down, sit our families down and say, hey, I know you're trying to help me. This isn't helping me. This
Hmm.
is actually really activating for me. This is actually really setting me back. I don't want to hear this. Like, I love you. I don't want to hear this. So please don't share this with me because it's not actually helping me move forward
Hmm.
in whatever way makes sense for the relationship. But I do think that's something to keep in mind when we think about setting boundaries. It's not just setting boundaries with our ex, too. It's also setting boundaries within our family relationships and our friend relationships and how we either talk about the ex or navigate the relationship with the ex. Because, in the same way, kids pick up on things. And if you have a child around and your mom is ranting about what your ex has done on Facebook or this new person, they soak it up. So I think that setting those boundaries with friends and family is equally important as setting those boundaries with yourself.
100%. And now here comes the tricky part. You set these boundaries and you've moved on from for the most part from wanting to look and wanting to see what your ex is doing. But now your ex is dating somebody new and they're really enjoying their time with your kids, triggering enough as it is. And then they're posting pictures of themselves with your kids or of your kids. And you're like, hey, wait a second. No thanks. How do you think that needs to be handled?
In that situation, there's of course nuance. Hopefully, there's a good relationship with the co-parent or a relationship where you can have that conversation.
Hmm.
Because I do think that my initial aggression would be with the co-parent rather than with the new girlfriend or boyfriend, whoever it is. So I would try to have a conversation with your ex and discuss your concerns and discuss what is worrying you, what you're nervous about, and what you would like, and to lean into, hey, this is what I would like. The tricky side to that is, again, just coming from like the core perspective, there's only so much, unless something is in the parenting plan, there's only so much that can be done there. Hopefully, you have a good relationship with your co-parent and with their new partner that you can set some guidelines around that. But I do think that goes back to, unfortunately, like managing your own emotional world because there's only so much you can do. Hopefully, you can have that conversation. I would encourage having that conversation. But I do think that that goes back to how do you want to respond to this because that's what's within the realm of control. And it's really hard. I don't think this is something that's easy to navigate, but you can do what you can do. And then part of this, the real challenging thing about co-parenting is once you don't have those kids, there is a limit in how you can navigate situations like that, I think. But I'm curious what your thoughts are as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm 7 years out and I have my ex and I have come such a long way in our co-parenting relationship, but the what I like to call the fuckery of co-parenting is the fact
Hmm.
that you have to now give these precious lives that you
Hmm.
created and you've been raising around the clock. Now you have a limited amount of time with them or less time with them, and you have to share them with the person you no longer love or trust or like. And then when, they're there, you can't really tell them how to live, what to do, how to do it because you've signed a parenting plan that for all intents
Hmm.
and purposes says, I trust this person with my kids. It's the hardest thing in the world for a mom. And
Hardest.
so
Yeah.
that's why I know for both genders, moms and dads, the idea of the children, first of all, putting children on social media is dangerous in itself, and that's a separate conversation. But then when let's say you have a belief that like my child should not be on social media for the world to see, and now this new person comes into the mix and doesn't care,
Hmm.
that's triggering no matter how emotionally evolved you are in this divorce or separation. It's really, really hard for people to deal with. I learned the hard way
Yeah.
when I was dating my husband in the beginning of our relationship and I would post a picture of my daughter. I would include her because I would include my stepdaughter because my mindset was like, I don't want her to feel left out. But then I
Hmm.
had to realize like, wow, that must have been so triggering for her mom, and
Yeah.
now I'm very careful with that. And I take the same stance with my ex and his new girlfriend. Like I would prefer that you not
Yeah.
post my kid.
Absolutely. And you have to address it. I do feel like if you have a concern, address it. And it is the hardest thing in the world. Like you said, you raise these beautiful beings and you have to pass them off. Like that is incredibly, incredibly challenging and nerve-wracking. And so that's where I go back to it's who do you want to be in this situation? It doesn't mean it's easy, but how you respond is what's in your power of control. And so have the conversation, hope that they hear you, hope that your ex and hope that their new partner hear you and are willing to navigate this with you and to set those guidelines. But at the end of the day, like the incredibly tough thing is that once you pass your kids over and you're following a parenting plan, you're following a custody agreement, there is only so much you can do. And that's where, I again, like this is a completely separate conversation in terms of kids and social media, but it is nerve-wracking and you have to, even though it's triggering, I do think that the response is how do you want to show up and how can you take care of yourself in that process?
Yes. And also, if you are going to make any attempt to communicate about that and shut it down, recognize that you have to practice what you preach. It goes both
Yeah.
ways, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have one last thing I want to touch on. I don't know why I find it, well, I know why I find it so troubling. And that's because what you put on social media, what you say about your ex publicly is always going to get back to the children. Maybe not directly from you, but then they're going to be on social media on one day and a friend is going to say, "Hey, look what your mom said," or "Look what your dad said." There are so many social media accounts right now that are just like, they call themselves divorce accounts, but all they do is bash the behavior of the other parent. And, from the outside, it looks like, well, how can you be mad at them when you're saying and putting all these things out there that are going to make them mad and behave badly towards
Mhm.
you, right? What do you have to say about accounts like that?
Oh, so other like divorce accounts or divorce coaches or things like that.
That just are intent on using their platform to bash their exes.
I frankly inappropriate. I just don't think it's helpful. I think that when we have these accounts out there that are trying to support through people through separation, through divorce, and the only angle is bashing the ex, it I think that
And name calling and
and name
labeling and
calling and
blaming.
labeling, I think that what it does is it actually just puts fuel on the fire to some
Mm.
degree, especially when you're trying to either make a co-parenting dynamic work for your children or trying to process the separation yourself and actually move forward. When you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're following accounts that is just about labeling, just about name calling, just about tearing your ex down, it's placing you back in a state of emotional upheaval. And it's very challenging and tricky to make the progress you want to make and actually moving forward with your life and creating a life that is fulfilling for you, peaceful for you, nurturing for you, and for your children. That's really difficult to do when you're in a constant place of upheaval. And I think the tricky thing about some of these accounts too that are just about, poking at the ex or, degrading the ex is it does, I think, like one of the top things that I've noticed get tossed out there in the last few years was narcissism. And
Narcissist.
like,
I knew you were
yeah,
going to go there.
yeah. And
I have
and
no
it's like
patience for it.
it's unfortunately it's no one can actually define certain things like that unless it's a mental health professional. And but we're getting this Instagram filtered version of these labels and of these words and of these dynamics. And then in some ways, yes, for some people, that's, oh, a validation of I'm not crazy. And maybe these things were happening in the relationship. But I also think for a lot of us, it's unfortunately, again, just putting fuel on the fire in a way that is not actually truthful or helpful to the situation you're in at that time. So I have. I have limited patience for
Same,
those accounts.
same,
If I'm
same.
being transparent, because I just don't actually think it's helpful. It might
No.
feel good, it might feel validating in the moment, but if your goal is to move forward and you want to orient yourself towards that, then part of that is getting to an emotionally regulated place within yourself and working through those emotions and working through your separation so that you can move forward. But a lot of these accounts, I think, just keep the irritation going.
They do, and I think they do it for, likes versus education. Like I always say, I could sell out and talk about narcissists all day long, but it is so
Mhm.
unethical and so unprofessional of me to do that. And I just won't. And I think, again, as a social media consumer, this is where boundaries on yourself come into play again, because you have to say to yourself, like, I'm going to be scrolling endlessly no matter what. That's what we do. We sit and we scroll, and that's a part of our lives now. But like, I'm responsible for what I consume. Like, how do I want to feel when I put my phone back down? Do I want to be triggered and angered? Or do I want to look at posts that are actually going to give me solution oriented guidance towards something I'm struggling with? And
Yeah.
and I think that's also part of moving on after a breakup is being mindful of what you consume.
Yeah, I think that having that intention of what do I want to intake, like what do I want my online experience to be in terms of getting some, like if you're looking for supportive educational content around separations, around co-parenting, it's like, what do you want that experience to be? And being really mindful, because again, part of, I think, social boundaries and social media boundaries is also what are you letting onto your feed? And how do you want to manage that? How do you want to feel, like you said, when you put the phone down? Do you want to feel uplifted? Do you want to feel inspired? Do you want to feel like you can actually make some progress in your daily life? Or do you want to be angry all day? Do you want to have that, those emotions be poked at all day? And I think, unfortunately, following those accounts, while it might feel validating in the moment and you might have that sense of dopamine in the moment, I do think what it really does is it activates us for the rest of the day. And then who are we being the rest of the
Hmm.
day? Are we
Hmm.
being who we want to be? Are we showing up how we want to show up?
Hmm. God, that is such a good topic. I'm so glad that we have covered this because it needs to be said, like I always say, Instagram is not your therapist. This
Hmm.
post that I'm posting should be taken with a grain of salt. If it applies to you, great. If it doesn't, keep scrolling. Like this idea that we're just going to throw buzzwords out there and say it applies to everyone who's following me. This is your ex. I think
Yeah.
not only does it show a gross irresponsibility on behalf of the poster, but it it kind of just it waters down or it degrades the work of the people who are actually there trying to uplift and care. So I'm
Hmm.
so glad we said that there's so many different ways we can talk about social media after a separation, how you can feel better about what your ex is posting, how you can set boundaries so that you don't feel like you're being watched or scrutinized by your ex, how you want your children to be displayed to the public, and
Hmm.
conversations you can have with your ex about that. Because I do believe that at the end of the day, no matter how contentious a pair of exes may be, they do want safe and healthy children. So it's a great conversation to have with your ex if you feel you can have it carefully. Lucy,
Yeah.
this has been really, really, really amazing. Any other last tips you have for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say that really, if possible, if you have it when you're going through a separation, especially in the early days, I'm sure there's a lot of emotional tension between you and your ex. But I do think the sooner you can have the conversation around social media with your ex, the better, because then you can start to transition not only your day-to-day life, but also the online lives that you two put out there and make sure like, okay, is this what's best for our child? Is this what's going to be like what dynamics can we agree to for the safety and well-being of our child on in
Mm-hmm.
terms of social media platforms?
Mm-hmm.
It can be a really, I think sometimes we get nervous to bring up these conversations. And also, these are just conversations that we really haven't had to have, I think, in terms of separation until social media came around. So it might feel a little weird to bring up social media with your ex of like how I want you, please act this way, not this, those conversations can feel a bit funny. But I do think that we are in that digital age now and just bring it up ahead of time, hopefully in a calm, conversation between your ex if possible. But I do think the sooner you have the conversation, the better, because then you're not guessing at it later. Because I do think, like, to bring some humanness into it, if your ex is posting, they might not think it's something that is going to upset you in the same way that if you post about your children, you don't know if it's upsetting your ex. So sometimes there is just that level of humanness. The sooner you can have a conversation, the more clarity you can get going forward.
Absolutely. Great advice. Lucy, where can everybody find you if they want to connect with you further?
So you can find me on my website, www.shiftyourstory.net, or you can find me over on Instagram and TikTok at lucy.m.price.
Love it. Thank you, Lucy. And for those of you listening, if you have more questions about your separation and social media and your kids and the role that it all plays together, feel free to reach out, info@momsmovingon.com. We love having you here at the Moving On Method. Lucy, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.